So hi there and welcome back to my channel. This is another episode of the construction of my Ferrari 333 SP, and this is I think the final step before the production in racing of the model, that will be made I think further soon. I don't know exactly when because I have several other projects in progress, so I have a scheduling, but the model is anyway ready. I wanted to show up you which will be the production type that I'm going to do. So basically this is a reissue of a racing kit of I think 25 years ago, and the biggest modification that I made on this, it was pretty decent in the shape. It was available in both the configuration for American IMSA and board, the short track version for the pilot car, with different side and different tire intake. So it was basically the same model, and they just have this, and they will reissue this model. And of course, the car will be the Momo Daytona 98 winner from Giampiero Moretti, the super famous red Momo car, number 30. It was the car that always have been in exhibition when still Moretti was alive. So until I think yes, nearly 10 years ago now that is gone. In the Mo-Kart was a little indoor go-kart place around Milano, near Rozzano, and the car was constantly present there. When guys go there to race with go-karts, they can admire the winning car of Daytona. So it was a legendary vehicle driven by Moretti. And so the reissue that I made is basically different from the original model because I empty part of the inner side of the mainframe, the basic hull. This is a basic shell of the body. I didn't want to cut the back part to make it more complicated in the mold, so the shape of the line of the model will be not touched, but not by me. But it will be anyway possible to dig even more inside the body. It will be casted in a different resin, much softer than this. This was a resin used in purpose to be extremely resistant to high temperature, and was a kind of I don't know what to say. It looked like gypsum more than a resin, but it was probably done to resist more to the O. And this was a company providing models already finished, and they tried in 1/24 scale to do something, but then they give up with this scale. So um, there was a huge request anyway, a huge demand for this kind of Ferrari in 24 scale. And I think it just exists this one, something from the slot cars that is anyway a conversion from this model anyway. And then the Perry Racing kit that I never had it in my hand, that was featuring also the engine, probably absolutely well done model. I never had that kit anyway by my hands. My idea was just to provide a reissue of this model. So it was quite simple, because we have a upper part, the lower part. I empty also this side, and didn't want to make it too thin to avoid problems during the casting of this model, and as well as I didn't open the rear part here that must be cut by the model if you are willing to have the showing up of the motor. As a motor I used a V12 coming from an F50 kit, and I added the air intake. Of course it should be even more slightly modified because this is just a basic idea on how the model should work. And of course if somebody want to make it hyper detailed, you have to dig much more here and raise the level of the real resin, becoming like a kind of sheet. And I didn't want to do it because it became too complicated for the resin purpose. But I gave anyway the referring point for the, you see there, for the gas pillar on that side, so you know where to dig and you know where to have the referring point on how to go deeper. And of course all the rear part must be thinnered as much as you can, to make the coal believable and visible if you don't want to show up the complete line of the car. I like it a lot, the shape of the 333 SP. Remember that this was formerly named like a Ferrari, in reality it was a Dallara car, and the shape is basically featuring this way, if I can make it. There is nothing prepared, so like that. It should be in this position. This is the position of the frame over the head of the pilot, and the kit is basically this one. So you will have two drive axle down there, and of course part of the mechanic I also will provide a couple of radiators, but all the tube and the piping inside should be made by the modeler himself when you cut the part. My model, one of these I want to rebuild absolutely and make it in the Daytona configuration. Also here I have the original transparent parts for the model, that will be used like a dime for the vacuum form side. In the front end here is not so difficult to rebuild, but if we have the original part is always better. As well as this is part of the dashboard. You see the model was very simple, but the shape was absolutely astonishing. So it was absolutely correct and nice in the dimension, in the proportion. A seat, you have to add the seat belt and the buckles as usual, and the rear wheels that in my model they were leaking oil, so probably the resin used for these wheels were a little bit off, and anyway the rim is the correct one, and the size and the dimension is the correct one. So I will just recast them in resin, in ordinary resin, so nothing so special. The rear wing will be placed in a single piece. They made it in the original kit very complicated and divided in 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces, and I also had an issue because one of the side was gone, so I didn't know how to make it back, but I just made it in thick plastic, so this part will be molded in a single piece to make it simple, so all the angles are already straight and not so difficult. I don't know how to organize the molding of this. This is the frame holding up the wing, and in this model the wing was in metal, so it was extremely heavy. Instead in my copy it will be in resin, so extremely light. This because I think that this part should be with pictures and so on connected to the real gearbox of the motor down there, so I cannot have something that is huge and heavy like this wing was. So there was no purpose to use this model like a full open kit if I maintain the part in metal, because that will be too heavy for the final purpose, and the extra part that you will get in my model will be this line that is basically some details for the cockpit, some photo etched parts, made it thicker, the rear fin, steering wheel as from the original car, cooling radiator for the back, and the side mirror for the cockpit. As I said, here you have that is the frame that goes behind the head of the pilot, and the rubbers around the cockpit plus the radiator, of course. There is the 4 main discs. They are a little too big, but the purpose was in the original kit they were in photo etched part. It was just to fill it up the inner side of the wheel. So this will be basically a kind of good start if you want to build up a full detail model. My idea will be to have something that I can make in the way that I want to do it, like a proper model for the Daytona kit. But if you just want to make it up like an ordinary curbside model, it is not a big issue. So you just don't use the rear part, you just use the ordinary original part from the kit, and that's it. So we'll have a curbside model of the 333 SP without getting mad or without waiting some company to make it again. I just seen that Hero made it in 1/12 scale, so that was a big improvement for the documentation and for the details of the model. So that's it. It is interesting because everything started. My idea to recast this model was that I wanted to have a properly made. I made it, I think, about 30 years ago, not 20 years ago now. I made the original car that you see in some of my pictures in my social media, but I made it well, that I didn't like it so much, so because I made a mistake in the front end, so I didn't like so much that configuration. But I wanted to have something to work on this project that is a fourth project coming on. This is you already seen some images of this stuff. This is my own blueprint of the Alfa se048. Was the prototype supposed to be racing in the early 90s. Remember that this Dallara I'm making here, the 333 SP Ferrari Dallara car, was made in 1993. Instead, this model was a project from Alfa Romeo abrupted, so they didn't arrive to the end of the project because they wanted to concentrate their resource over the DTM series and not over the C group that was dying in the early 90s, the same reason for which that Ferrari was racing in the IMSA series mostly than the World Sport Car GT, because they were not existing any longer. Was that period between the 80s and the 90s where the categories was dying, and the funny part is that if you see basically these two models, there is too many similitudes, between the line, the wheelbase, and so on. The car is basically the same, you see? The car is basically the same. Look at that line. This is typical. The Coca-Cola structure on the side of the car is typical from the Dallara constructions, So I think, look, the angle is nearly the same one, the proportion is nearly the same, identical car, you see. And so my idea would be anyway to use in the future one of these external hull. Of course, the central part is completely different because it was a closed car, so completely different, But at least the side parts is extremely similar to the Alfa Romeo se048, and I probably will work on it when I will go on with the creation of this master. I want to do this car because it's quite interesting, and a very, very interesting story, behind, because it was a kind of surprise made by the engineers from Alfa Romeo that wanted to prepare something for the Le Mans of the 90s, 1991 I think it was, and then it went absolutely bad because they made it without the authorization of the real CEO of the company, was Guidel at the time, and they were nearly get fired by the company because they had this idea to create this model by their own, under their own ideas, and at the end the car was they nearly wanted to destroy it because it was presented featuring a motor but without a gearbox, so there was no gearbox and transmission in the pictures that you see around of the se048. Just the motor is a real one. That was indeed a Ferrari engine, a V10 Ferrari engine with the headers with Alfa Romeo logo, so that was even more a kind of big argument and discussion inside the high level of Fiat Group, and this was told me by one of the guys that have nearly fired after this adventure, and it was him telling me that this car exists for a miracle today and is sitting in the museum of Alfa Romeo in Arese, because at the time they really wanted to scrap it down and destroy the vehicle, not to be existing any longer, and they felt for some strange reason they were able to save it and not to sell it, and wonder what she could do. It was just a project, just a real prototype of a prototype. So guess what if, a real what if of a wonderful car, because anyway the car was absolutely fantastic racing, and I've seen some picture that they made in the presentation without the covering, because this car, like the Jaguar JR9, had the idea to cover the rear wheel, probably to increase the aerodynamic effect in the air, to be closer. So in all the picture it is quite nasty because the line became faked by the rear wheel completely covered. If you see the car with the showed up rear wheel, the rear wheel is exceptional. It's really, really looking like the 333 SP. The car is extremely similar. All the Dallaras have this. The Dallara of these years have this configuration. Just of course the front end was different. And guess what? It could be in the prototype series. That was the years of the Jaguar, the years of the Mercedes. So who knows what it could be. It was sad because I tried to contact for this, not for the 333 SP, but for the SE048. I tried to contact some of the guys present in the picture that you can find it online, and the only one that was extremely kind to call me back was Engineer Borghi. It was the owner of the company making the countings over the air loader, the charge of on the wings of the car, and he's present in one of these pictures. He was so kindly to call me back a couple of times, and we had a brief talk, and he also told me to try to get in touch with Giampaolo Dallara, but I had no way, I had no clue, because all my messages were filtered by some nasty secretary that don't know neither what are we talking about. I don't say this because I'm bitter to them, but because it really was something funny. When I write to the Alfa Romeo Museum asking, because I know that the car was there, all the picture that we see online is referred to the car sitting behind the entrance of the Alfa Romeo Museum. So I was just asking them because there is nothing about this car, absolutely nothing. I used the regulamentation for the C group, and then I add using the picture that I had online to draw little by little this blueprint. This is the 10th evolution of the blueprint. Don't exist anything because that part of the documentation about the real car have been completely destroyed and gone, because really the Fiat management didn't want her to exist at any cost, so that have to be destroyed completely. So they saved the real car, but all the documentation that was in paper, at the time we're talking of late 80s, did not exist any longer. So I had to create this by my own, and nobody giving me any tip about this. I had some tips from Paolo De Vodier, great modeler, and other modelers making the same process when they create from nothing a model. So it was absolutely interesting. And this guy from Engineer Borghi was so interested in this project and so on, and he tried to give me this tip to keep in touch to the Lara. But when I contacted the museum of Alfa Romeo, I just wanted to know the wheelbase, because with the wheelbase, knowing the regulamentation of the width of the car, of the height of the car, working with the pictures and so on, I can deduct the measure. This is kind of fantasy model. But the Alfa Romeo of Araser answered me, we don't have that car. Sorry, sir, we don't have it. They say, but lady, if you simply turn your head and you look it back, it's that red stuff that you have behind, just in image. Then she did, and then after 2 days arrived the measure of the wheelbase of the car. So thanks a lot, but it's sometimes the people working in such places is not so interested in the cars that they have to show up to people like we modelers are. So that's the short story of this blueprint, that now it's currently sitting here waiting to be further developed after the arrival of that production in Resi, because one body more will be used for this purpose. I already prepared this central island of the cockpit with the air intake. This is a part that I have already done. I still didn't show it, but it's done. So I want to see how will be the combination. Will be just a curbside kit, as I said, or maybe I will do something like in the Ferrari, because I have a Ferrari V10 engine that can be used for that. So if you want to use a Ferrari engine, the real car didn't have any gearbox, so we had to work with fantasy to do something like that. But I don't think it's such a big issue, So we will see in the future what's going on with this other project, And that's it. So this is the Ferrari project, and we are nearly there. I think is a nice idea. Of course, it's always possible to do better stuff. There was also some guy that wrote me very kind, making evidence. But the disposition of the exhaust, I know they were different in the rear race. They were straight, simpler than this one. They didn't have the muffler, they didn't have the silencer like this one. But this is just a base that the modeler should work with to make a full detail part. Of course, when I will do it, I will make it correctly in general and so on, but I don't want it to become even more complicated, to be produced, because this is a part that several modelers can also say, what, I like the shape of the car, I don't give a fuck about the inner side of the motor, so let's see it and keep it like it is, just to have the shape of a correct 333 SP Daytona Winner 98 in my collection, and that's it. Stay tuned for the production. I hope during 2023 this will be done. This will be quite expensive because this is what you see is a full kit, several parts, the decal sheet. So this will be quite impressive stuff. I have several projects that are in standby, the ECV1, the WTCC, Alpha 156. So there is some stuff going on. Porsche body, the RSR reissues plus the track series and so on. So there is a lot of stuff on the grill, so we will see what arrives first. Just stay tuned and thanks for watching, and see you in the next.